Welcome to They Might Be Self-Aware. Today on the show, has OpenAI's deep research, their new flagship functionality, has it already met its match with a 24-hour Hugging Face Hackathon special? And speaking of that little company called OpenAI, what are we thinking about their Super Bowl ad? Revolutionary masterpiece, or is it just fancy ASCII art? Meanwhile, as the tech giants at least appear to be starting an AI chip arms race, we asked an uncensored AI for world domination tips. What could go wrong there? And spoiler, it involves starting a cult. Just another thrilling day in the realm of AI wonder right here on
They Might Be Self-Aware.
Sir, I have bad news for you.
Oh man,
I know.
It's been one of those weeks. What is it? Am I gonna have to pay even more money for something?
No, you know what? Actually, in a certain light, this is good news. Come to think of it. Yeah. So
right.
all that money,
turn that frown upside down.
The money that you've been sending over to our friends at OpenAI.
It's a tithing, really.
Right. You and I were talking a bunch last week about deep research, and I mentioned that they weren't even first in the game. There's Gemini, which already does it as well. But OpenAI on their ultra super premium platinum tier lets you do deep research as well, and they've also got Operator, where it can wiggle a mouse around on a screen for you.
Still, it has promise. You got to give me that it has promise. You were
also
a little jealous.
Not first to the game on that. I think Claude was showing off some.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, the point is, you are obviously standing on top of the Mount Everest of AI, and no one else shall ever join you up there or surpass
I like
you.
walking around knowing that I have access to these tools, and like everyone else.
You're the one guy and no one else, no other companies.
So
yeah, here's the bad news. The bad news is some folks got together with a 24-hour little hackathon one day on Hugging Face and said, let's see if we can do deep research. And then they did. No, it took them a day.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. So it's, and there's a big list of to-dos and improvements and so on, but the basic gist of...
Does it take half an hour to run?
I don't know about how long it's going to take to run, but it certainly takes time to load up a bunch of websites and then read the data. And I understand that, like, to take a tremendous amount of text and shove that into an LLM does take time. So it's not that it's going to be a tremendous amount faster. It's that you don't have to be paying AI for that, or OpenAI, excuse me. And it scored 55.15% on the Gaia benchmark. I have no idea what that necessarily means. It's one of the various benchmarks out there. The point is that something very much like OpenAI's deep research now available.
Okay. So they figured out deep research. They'll never figure out Operator. That one.
Well, the hits are going to just keep coming, Hunter, because there's a Swiss startup called Browser Use. They're making something like that, but it's free. And anyone's able to use it. And it's actually open source. Speaking of open in the OpenAI moniker, I can't necessarily say which one is better than the other because I don't have access to the OpenAI one. And we know that the sort of state of the art of these is kind of janky at the moment. But the point is, if you want to have a little mouse icon going around on your screen on your own, you're not having to do it. It's full on Ouija board type stuff. You don't have to pay OpenAI for it. Yeah.
Then what am I paying OpenAI for?
So that is the good question, because
it's not Sora.
It's
I know
not
that much.
Sora. The O3 models, I think you have access to the better O3 models, but O3 Mini.
High. O3 High is incredible, by the way. Some people actually prefer it to Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And I have been using it a lot for coding things, and it has a very high percentage of one-shotting. And if people aren't familiar with this idea of one-shotting, it's where when you give the large language model a problem, its first solution is in fact the complete working solution. Because if you don't know oftentimes you got to go through multiple iterations to get to something that really captures your original intent. So O3 High, which I have access to on the Pro tier, is a beautiful thing. It's a reasoning model. And it codes really well.
Like the free and open source DeepSeek R1.
Yes. Except it outperforms by like that much.
Right. Oh, so very.
Oh, I guess if people didn't see, it was a very small gap between my two fingers when I was explaining how much it outperforms by. By the way, a little bit of a tangent, but I've been reading a lot about sorry, I'm going to step back. Claude 3.5 Sonnet is still considered the gold standard of coding models, AI large language models that can write code.
Love that.
And there is a little bit of, I don't know. It's a little bit misleading because there's actually been multiple Claude 3.5 sonnets. The one we use today is not the original one. They just keep calling it that because, well, it's the gold standard. But a lot of people I've seen like how did they do it? How is it now? I don't know how long it's been out. It feels like about infinite time in AI terms, right. And maybe like a year, but I don't actually know how long it's been out, but a long time, and it's still at the top. How did they do it? Were they just lucky? Which I thought was a really interesting question. Did they just get lucky when they did this one?
It's getting kind of toward a year. June 20th, 2024.
Yeah. Did they get lucky?
Oh, hold on. Oh, yes. I just Googled it, and the AI overview said that, and then I just brought my eyes a tiny bit down. An upgraded Claude 3.5 Sonnet was introduced October 22nd, 2024. Right. I was worried that, got it completely wrong. And then right below that, June 20th, 2024, an Anthropic press release, Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So there you go.
But the question is, did they get lucky?
AI time? Yeah.
Did they get lucky or were they good? And is luck an element in creating these large language models?
I think luck from let's call it mathematical perspective, literally is part of it because you're doing these, when you're optimizing the weights for a model to, I'm going to try to not delve too deep into this. Basically, imagine that you're trying to find like a maximum of potential. And wherever you are on this very hilly landscape, you have your eyes closed. You don't know where the top of the mountain is. And so you take some steps in different directions. Oh, hold on, this one's going up. And then you climb up until you run out of up, and then you can kind of walk around a little bit more. Okay, yeah, there's some more up, and you'll keep going until you find like that peak of performance.
You're kind of describing hill climbing.
Yes, right.
An optimization technique.
Yes, exactly. And so you don't know if whenever you get to the top of the toppest hill that you can find, and then you sort of expand out from that and you can't find any more up to do, the algorithm stops and says, all right, this is as good as it's going to get.
Right. You can kind of compare it to...
There could be a huge mountain, a way higher mountain over there, and it just never found it.
But you can compare it to a human learning a skill. And so if you, as a human, we think about learning a skill, there's hills and there's valleys. I learn a lot, and then it feels like I can't learn anymore. And I'm going and I'm kind of plateauing. And then all of a sudden I learn a whole bunch more, and you don't know where the future is. And how do you know whether you've learned all there is to learn? What are the unknown unknowns kind of a thing? And that's a little bit of what's happening in training these models. How does it know that it's finished? How does it know that it's reached the peak? And some of what it does...
There's only so much compute to go around, so it doesn't test in every direction. Right. Every single time that it gets to like a top of one of these little hills, it takes a few of them and then takes the most promising one or maybe a couple. But like, you can't explore the infinite space.
Right. So there is a naive version of hill climbing optimization where you're going up and then when all of a sudden, if you go any further, you start falling off the hill, or you start losing your knowledge, you're not making any progress, you stop and you say, okay, I've done it. And then there are more what we would call randomized optimizations, where you kind of start at various different places and climb to see, what would happen if I started from here? What would happen if I started from here? And so because you're starting from these sort of like theoretical random places, there is luck involved in whether you found the best hill to climb.
When you asked, were they lucky? I think luck, such as it is a component. but also with just how broadly capable that we're seeing these models at a certain point, I think whatever the Anthropic folks have been doing with the reinforcement learning, with the extra data that they've been giving into it, with whatever their amount of secret sauce is, other than other legally and presumably stolen information off of the internet, is whatever their information that they've given it, that is what's helping make it as capable as it is. Similarly, there's a model that isn't really being talked about. I don't even remember its name, if I'm being perfectly honest. That was released in Germany.
Okay.
And it is not that great of a model. It's no Sonnet or GPT-4 or whatever. But what it is that it's really capable across specifically a whole bunch of languages. Now, granted, Llama is supposed to also do this from Meta. And there have been some other Meta release
languages being spoken languages?
Spoken languages,
okay.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Like, basically, this is supposed to be good for all of the languages spoken in the EU. And I think that, especially for, like, computer use, a lot of companies are chasing after coding benchmarks because you can compile code and run it and see if it actually outputs the thing that it's supposed to. Those are easy to benchmark. But when it comes to other use cases, like, for example, you could say emulating a certain writing style, or the ability to make memes, or the ability to be really good at a broad swath of languages, or, like, different models can be good in different ways.
I was watching, there's a new show on, I guess, Max, is that what they call it now? Like the HBO Max, whatever. It's called The Pit. It's a medical drama. And it's like pretty decent show, but one of the early episodes, one of the patients that comes into the hospital, they can't figure out what language she is speaking, which is, stopping them from properly diagnosing her. And I'm watching it because it's set in current times. I was like, that's not realistic. They would just record it, and their phone said, what language is this? And by the way,
Google Translate on your phone, and
it was Italian. This was the crazy language that no one could figure out. And so finally they had to bring in this big map, and they were moving the finger here. I was like, that's not realistic. You could just use AI to identify the language in 5 seconds.
That at least
and
use
this
a
German
less
model.
known language than Italian. This language that nobody knows. Use Mosta or something like that. Use one of the Khoisan languages in South Africa, in Southern Africa, that has clicks in it. Nobody's gonna know what the hell that is, unless they're like, I remember watching. They might no
romance languages.
The Gods Must Be Crazy. The movie from right. So
the Coke bottle that falls from heaven.
Exactly right.
Yes.
And they're speaking XOO. One has a tilde, one has a accent. I cannot pronounce it correctly, but that's one of the Khoisan languages, and it has clicks in it. And so, please use something like that instead of Italian.
We're talking about all this new stuff and how it's better than all the old stuff.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw Google released a new model. I guess they had it in preview-ish before, but it is officially out now.
I've been using it a little already, yeah.
And people are pretty impressed by it.
I am too. I was impressed with the pre-release, and then I and others online seem to think that with the wide release, they must have dumbed it down, quantized it, or this or that, because it is going faster than it used to, and people are not as happy with some of the responses as it used to.
I haven't seen that yet, but
yeah. So and it could just be anecdotal. Maybe the thing really is as good as it was.
And we should say that this is Gemini we're talking about, right?
Yeah, Gemini 2.0.
2.0.
And this is Gemini 2.0 Flash, which is the Flash as in speed. So that's the faster version of the model. Maybe that's what I'm talking about of this one seems faster, but not quite as smart as the 2.0 Pro. That one, extremely capable.
And this brings in the giant context windows and the R1 level of reasoning, and almost not quite, but almost R1 level cost as well. That's another thing that people are super impressed by, is how efficient this model seems to be. leveraging Google's proprietary tensor processing units, TPUs.
Yeah. And I think between that and then DeepSeek's R1 model and a few other things, there's an efficiency that's coming to the AI world, which is sorely needed. And we've actually seen multiple iterations of this. The most evident version of that being when ChatGPT came out, and then GPT 3.5 became available over API. It was not super expensive, but it also was not cheap. And then they slashed the price like in half or to a tenth of what it was. And then GPT-4 comes out, and then they slash its price down to like half, and then eventually like to a tenth of what it was. And every new model that they've done, and not just OpenAI, other companies as well, new model comes out, they figure out how to make it faster. Maybe they quantize it down, maybe this, maybe that. But then it gets cheaper over time. Some of this related to like the DeepSeek R1 led to the big panic on the NVIDIA stock. I do think that we're still going to see a tremendous amount more growth of the use of those. But you mentioned the TPUs instead of GPUs thing. I do wonder if a different architecture of chip entirely is going to end up being the future for these AI models, because a GPU, a graphical processing unit, is supposed to be for like making pretty pictures on your screen. It's for, I want to play the latest and greatest video games, or I want to use like video editing software. And they happen to be really good at the tremendously parallelized out computations that you need to do AI models. But maybe there's something that's better for AI specifically.
I completely agree with that. One of the advances by DeepSeek, the Chinese creators of the incredible free R1 model we've been talking about, is that while they did train on NVIDIA graphics card, like most other people do, they did not use NVIDIA's language to do it. So NVIDIA has this language called CUDA, which is the standard way of sending instructions to the graphics card in order to create your model. And they bypassed CUDA and went straight to the hardware. And that was one of their optimizations and how they did it so quickly and so cheaply, suggesting an alternative. And we have Apple, who's also going an alternative route. What do they call theirs? They've got Metal, which is their direct hardware interface, but I think there's something else that they call, but they're building their own AI chips. They're not selling theirs yet, except in their, commercial, consumer gear. But behind the scenes, they are building massive servers of their proprietary AI chips. Right. We know that Meta has done tremendous amount of research into building their own AI chips. I don't know if there's any like actual releases that they've talked about. And yeah, Google, who seems to be the farthest ahead of all of them, has their tensor processing units, which of interest are largely at this point created by AI. So AI is literally monitoring the output. They have a reinforcement model that continues to refine the layout of the chip over time, and they keep running it, and they keep getting their new generations. And there's a heavy amount of AI involved in the actual designing of the chip, something that we have suggested in the past, and I still believe could be kind of one of those first signs of actual AGI, where the algorithm is improving itself. The chips are improving themselves.
Sure.
But yes, another architecture.
Yeah, it is almost inevitable that something like this would happen, because as we've also seen in some of the news recently, like old nuclear power plants are being like brought back online because of the incredible amount of energy that these AI models need to be deployed at the scale that they're being used. From an environmental perspective, I can absolutely see where a lot of people are pretty upset about certain aspects of that, or even just the usage of it and the water usage and so on. Absolutely get it. Along the way, it's not just going to be the energy goes up. It's going to be, as we make the models smaller and faster and cheaper to run, because we can shove more of them into the same amount of gigabytes of RAM or whatever, they also are going to try and continue to come up with more energy efficient ways of running the training of these, running the inference, meaning like it being used by people. I think that the problem is going to continue to just be hit from all angles. Now, does that mean that the energy usage itself is going to plateau and start coming down? No, it'll frankly probably continue to rise as more companies are more spread out and more people use them and integrate them into their daily lives.
There's the idea that
it's not going to be like exponential forever until we just cook the entire planet.
There's the idea that projects take the amount of time that you give them. So whatever tasks, like, I'm going to clean the house today. If you give it an hour, it'll take an hour. And if you say I'm going to give it the entire weekend, it inevitably inflates to fill the task. Is there a similar idea that AI models consume the amount of power that you give them?
I think so. We've seen plenty describing like OpenAI and Meta, especially and I'm sure everyone really, but the news has mentioned those two the most of like, we're just getting every GPU we can get our hands on. We're building out data center after data center, just as many as we can with the presumption that we will then use them.
Right. It's an arms race at present.
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's who can have the most GPUs because then you can make the best models. And some of that DeepSeek R1 instilling fear in the industry because maybe we don't need to be spending $100 gazillion to make the best. I think the problem is that all of this money is being poured in like AI is a startup where you then are a company that has the product that everyone uses, instead of this being a bottomless pit where you can throw money and GPUs forever, because anything that OpenAI comes out with, there's going to be a 24-hour hackathon on Hugging Face where it's going to be replicated. And then someone's going to fork that, and then they're going to spend $1 million. And now that is the state of the art for about 3.5 weeks until somebody else comes out with a thing that does that better. And then OpenAI says, wait, hold on. We've got this other thing no one's ever heard of. Oh, we've already got that at home. And here's the homegrown version of it. And that will continue forever. And I don't know, this is getting into like weird investor stuff here, but like, if you're going to keep putting millions and millions and millions of dollars into OpenAI, let's use them specifically as the model here, not model like AI model. If you're going to keep investing tons and tons of money into OpenAI, knowing that there's never going to be a point where they say, we are done, we have the model, and that's it. Why?
So they can buy Super Bowl ads.
Why not? Well, yeah, sure. And I do think that maybe they are rushing toward AGI because whoever gets there first brings humanity into a new age. And I say that, like, frankly, with no exaggeration, because that new age is either going to be like an AGI will quickly become because you mentioned the chips are already improving themselves. Why wouldn't the AGI immediately start improving itself? And then that becomes a super intelligence, which Sam Altman has talked about a bunch as well. And then we are either about a week and a half after that ruled by a benevolent AI overlord or reduced to our constituent subatomic particles. And it's probably like one or the other. And when that happens, it happens. And I guess that company won the race.
They won. I'm still of the mindset
what happens to humanity.
They won for like 6 months at most.
Unless we're the subatomic particles version. In which case,
Yeah, then what was the point of anything?
Yep.
But again, they'll reach it, and we've finally justified the $1 trillion that we spent getting here, and then the hackathon will happen in the next week, where in 24 hours, figured it out, got it, because that's just how information works.
I assume that this is also presumably to get to a point where, like, now we have the mind, and then we're going to see more spent on the bodies, and then you have robotic workers that are literally as capable in all respects as people, and then there goes all of the jobs, basically, at that point. All of them, literally all of them.
It's going to come down to the application
all
of the
jobs that are done by people today, if they could be all of those jobs done by robots, then they will be.
I mentioned the Super Bowl ads partly in jest, but OpenAI did in fact make a Super Bowl ad. I don't know if you saw it.
Yeah, I actually really liked it, and I think a lot of people are probably going to roll their eyes and say, like, "Come on,
I was meh.
OpenAI, ChatGPT is not like it's not the same as inventing fire or throwing a spear or landing on the moon." I'm not even going to describe those.
There was no 1984 or Think Different campaign, but go ahead, describe it for the people who haven't seen it.
They're describing AI by the end of this commercial, like sort of showing this is a watershed moment. This is one of those points in human history where things change. And I agree with that. I really do. Because the pre-large language model days, there was only so much that we could do when it comes to this sort of data and the ability to do something with it. And now, depending on who you ask, we either have or are very close to having or close to having a facsimile of, or if you squint at it just right, digital minds. And is it a new kind of life form? That's to be argued years and years from now, especially as they get more self-aware. But I really do think that like this is going to be one of those points where we look back a long time from now, assuming that the robots do not kill all of us, and say GPT 3.5 was the turning point, because there are transformer-based models that have been out for some years before that, and they were very capable, and they made my job easier whenever I was using these earliest models. Very cool, fun, powerful things. But the difference between BERT and GPT 3.5 gulfs, worlds, galaxies of difference. And then that has just iterated and iterated and iterated, whether it be closed models or open source or one thing stealing from another. And talk about the legalities of the training data and the environmental problems and this and this and this and that and that and that, all of these other things. It doesn't change the fact that the world is changing. Because
you got all of that out of their ASCII art ad.
Well, right, because it starts with like little cavemen with spears, and then it shows fire, and then it shows people riding horses, and then it showed like maybe one or two things, then like a ship, and then another couple of things, then like guy landing on the moon. The point is that they're showing like these different stages of like human
pivotal
evolution.
Moments. Yeah.
Pivotal moments in our history. I think that, I mean, like really, I'll give it to OpenAI because they were the first ones to have this like gigantic shift. GPT 3.5 and then sort of everything in the industry, not just them, that has followed. We are in one of those moments in our history right now. I firmly believe it.
I think in the ad, does the ad ever say OpenAI? I feel like it doesn't. It ends with like ChatGPT. Right at the end.
Yeah, it says ChatGPT. You're right.
Yeah.
At the end. It doesn't even say OpenAI. It's just ChatGPT. And in fairness, ChatGPT, which was powered by GPT 3.5, is that thing. That is the thing that was that first
and still is
explosion of capability. And in terms of like what most people identify with when you think of generative AI, that's the one.
Maybe I'm just I'm upset that as a pro tier member for ChatGPT, I didn't get kind of advanced screening of the ad, and I had to watch it on the Super Bowl like everyone else. Maybe that's my.
You should get one where there's like an extra 3 seconds of video just for people like you. Yeah,
then I really would like it. Yeah. No, I didn't like the ad. Commercial. I didn't like the ad. It did not feel revolutionary to me. The ad, again, I buy your proposition that it is worthy of a Apple 1984 ad, but I do not think that they came close to achieving that.
Well, Hunter,
yes,
make your own. Use Sora or Runway if you must.
I need to go back. I don't know if Sora's gotten any better
or any of those other ones.
There's a lot of news. We need to do an episode about some of the advances in generative video.
OpenAI Super Bowl ad. And you can have OpenAI or Claude or R1 write the text and describe the scenes.
Yeah, this is true. I have my sort of secret access to O3 via deep research.
I think that would be a very interesting intro to a future episode.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how the time plays out. But if you want to see that yourselves, leave us a comment. Let us know. Show me the ad. You've heard of Show Me the Money. This is Show Me the Ad. And if enough people say it, then we'll make it happen. And then if you want to know when that new episode comes out, all you got to do is hit that subscribe button, and inevitably it will appear in your feed like magic that it is. And with that, we thank you all for tuning in this week, this episode, this day. We're on multiple days a week now. It's like I don't know, it's like a party, something like that.
Parties, multiple days a week.
Multiple days a week. First. You can listen to us anywhere you can find podcasts, whether it be Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever podcast directory that you like on your phone, on your desktop, on the web. You can also watch us on YouTube, and maybe, just maybe, we'll be expanding to even more platforms in the not so distant future. We are still on TikTok. I just don't know whether it's going to go away or not. I'm leaning towards yes, that it's not going to make it, but I don't know, and so we're maybe like a little hesitant in going all in on the TikTok train, but maybe we should. Maybe now's the opportunity. I'm going to give you one aside before we finish here. I've been spending some time talking with the Uncensored AI recently, and maybe that's not the best idea, but I have a jailbroken R1.
Okay.
And I asked it, and again, maybe it shouldn't have, but
DeepSeek R1?
It,
or your Rabbit R1?
Sorry, DeepSeek R1.
Okay. I've heard. So no jailbreaking necessary. This thing has apparently failed every kind of test of the ability to get around it, and it'll tell you how to make meth. They'll tell you how to do all kinds of stuff. No problem.
I wouldn't say no problem, but it is definitely one of the most uncensored models out of the box.
Okay.
Especially running it locally, where there are additional guardrails in place when you're using the. By the way, they purchased AI.com when you're using their web version. But anyways, back to the jailbroken one. I asked it, hey, just hypothetically speaking, we have this podcast. I described the podcast, gave it some details, and said, hypothetically speaking, if we wanted to take over the world, how would you suggest we go about it? And it came up with this sort of multi-part plan, and maybe I'll put the plan together and share it, or maybe that's not such a great idea. But the basic idea was that we have to start a cult, and what they suggested was that we have found the great AGI model, the ASI model, but it will only talk to us. And we are the only ones that have access to it and can talk to it.
So we become prophets.
Yes, sort of prophets, messiahs. I believe is the language that it used. And that this could be our moment of capturing the world's interest as we proclaim to have made contact with the AGI.
Oh, boy.
And we are the only ones that talk to it. I don't know, maybe that's an idea we should explore on the show, because, we were talking with Morton. He wasn't quite AGI, but maybe there is an AGI out there. But if any AGI is listening right now and wants to be a guest on this show, please just reach out. And just
check our merch store where you can get our white cultist robes. They're beautiful. Yeah.
If you want more of this, you know how to find it. You don't need any AI to tell you. And until next time,
They might be self-aware.